Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to another Backlog cleared video. Today I have managed to clear my Criterion Collection Eclipse series, which is their DVD series, which are all pretty much out of print and are fairly expensive on eBay and secondary markets. I only have 6 sets. Some of the sets have films that have now gotten Blu-ray releases by Criterion or other places. As far as I'm aware, the sets that I have don't have Blu-ray releases, and there are some sets that I'll maybe pick up in the future, but like I said, a lot of them have been upgraded by Criterion themselves. So like I said, I've only got 6, but the series do have like 4 to 6 films in each of the sets. So I'm just going to go through them. As you'll maybe notice, they're somewhat of an eclectic mix of Eclipse sets, but they're all well worth checking out, I think, for different reasons. But obviously that's a matter of personal taste. So I'm just going to go through them in numerical order, maybe talk a little bit about them, but not too much in detail. And again, you can let me know in the comments what Eclipse sets you have or what your favourite Eclipse set is. Or please let me know if any of these films do have Blu-ray releases. So we'll start with Eclipse set number 8, which is the Lubitch musicals. So this has 4 films: The Love Parade, Monte Carlo, The Smiling Lieutenant, and 1 Hour with You. Now, I'm not a particular musical fan, but I am a huge Lubitch fan, and these are all really enjoyable. As far as musicals, they're not in the kind of Busby Berkeley Hollywood kind of sense of musicals. They have people singing the occasional song, they have people speaking in rhyme a lot, which is actually really enjoyable. And again, the Eclipse ones just come in these thin little DVDs which have writing on the inside. So you have these nice little, then you have details in the back, just like, and you always have writing in the inside. So the first one is Monte Carlo. This box set, if you're not a fan of Maurice Chevalier, be warned, he is in 3 of the 4 films. And he is a little bit annoying, and you do kind of think, why did women fall for Maurice Chevalier? Until you actually see the 4th film without Maurice Chevalier, and you actually miss him, because the lead in the other film just isn't that good. He's called Jack Buchanan, and he is in Monte Carlo. These films are really interesting if you're a Lubitch fan. They're almost the germs, the kernels that would become those Lubitch classics of the late 30s or early 30s to mid 40s. So this one's from 1930. It's 90 minutes. So all of these are pre-code. So you'll actually be quite surprised by the amount of time the female actors spend in their underwear, and there's lots of suggestive dialogue that you just wouldn't get away with once the Hays Code came in 1934, 1935. So this stars Jack Buchanan, who's fairly wooden, and Jeanette MacDonald, who plays a countess, and Jack Buchanan plays a count who pretends to be her hairdresser to get close to her. This one's probably the weakest out of the 4 films, but there's still moments of that Lubitch genius, but just not enough of them. Next we have The Love Parade. This is from 1929. It's 109 minutes long. This is Lubitsch's first talking picture. It is a bit overlong, this Star Chevalier and MacDonald. And again, this is about queens and Maurice Chevalier getting involved with her. There's lots of innuendo in this one. And also in these Chevalier Lubitch films there's lots of fourth wall breaking, which is a lot of fun. I mean, these films aren't for everybody, but if you're a fan of Lubitch, they're well worth checking out. Then we have 1 Hour with You, which is only 78 minutes, again with Chevalier and Jeanette MacDonald. And again, this is one about a couple who are married, and then there's many hijinks when they each think they're having an affair with somebody else. And again, Charles Ruggles, who was the big game hunter in Bringing Up Baby, he's hilarious in this, as he is in all the films that he's in. This one's really good, and again, just lots of stuff that you just wouldn't get away with a few years later, thanks to the Hays Code. And then probably the best one, The Smiling Lieutenant from 1931, which is 89 minutes long. And this is Chevalier, but it also has Claudette Colbert and Miriam Hopkins, who both would later appear in far better Lubitch films. Hopkins would be in Design for a Living and Trouble in Paradise, and Colbert would be in Bluebeard's Eighth Wife. Again, this is Lubitch with his made-up countries again. This is the fictional kingdom of Flossenthurm, where Miriam Hopkins is a princess, and Chevalier, because he looks at her, ends up having to get into an arranged marriage even though he's in love with Claudio Colbert. And the hijinks, Miriam Hopkins is absolutely hilarious in this. And again, there's a wonderful scene where Claudette Colbert teaches Miriam Hopkins to kind of loosen up, and they both sing at the piano. It's just absolutely wonderful. So out of the 4 films, I would probably recommend The Smiling Lieutenant the most, just because it's Hopkins and Colbert playing off each other, and just it's absolutely wonderful. And it's the closest to a kind of hint at the greatness that would come quite quickly from Lubitch with Trouble in Paradise, and then Design for a Living, and then Ninochka and all to be. I mean, he's got so many great films. So this is it's an essential set for fans of Lubitch, just to see the kind of evolution of that Lubitch touch. Some of them are a bit rough around the edges, and again, more Chevalier can be a little bit smarmy and annoying at times. But the fourth wall breaking is a lot of fun. The kind of risky innuendo is a lot of fun. And the female leads are pretty wonderful throughout. So that's Eclipse series number 8. Then I have Eclipse series number 21. This is Oshima's Outlaw 60s, which contains Pleasures of the Flesh, Violence at Noon, Sing a Song of Sex, Japanese Summer Double Suicide, and 3 Resurrected Drunkards. So these are from the kind of mid-60s, really. So I'll just go through them again. So Pleasures of the Flesh, I did a random review of not that long ago. You can go and check that out. For me, this is the best film in the set. Again, my opinion is not fact. And again, this is about a guy who kills somebody, and then the witness to that blackmails him to keep 30 million yen for him while he goes to prison for 5 years. But he decides to spend the money, then kill himself before the guy's out. But again, I did a random review of that. You can go and check that out. Then you have Violence at Noon. I mean, most of these films are, Oshima was the l'enfant terrible of Japanese new wave. So a lot of these are political, a lot of these are metaphorical. So Violence at Noon is about a serial rapist that's based on a real case, and his relationship with his wife and one of his victims. I think it says there's like 2,000 cuts in the film, and to me, there's too many. I know it's avant-garde and it's cutting edge and it's radical and it's the 60s. And I know Oshima was certainly against a lot of the traditional Japanese filmmakers at the time and the older guard. But to me, a lot of the editing is unnecessary. It's still a good film, but at times it just uses technique over substance a bit too much. Next is Japanese Summer Double Suicide. This is from 1967. And again, this is all about metaphor. It's about a sex-obsessed young woman, a suicidal man, a gun-crazy gangster who end up all being involved with this underground group of characters. There's also an American who's shooting people randomly in the streets. Again, it's a political film. It's all over the place. It's absurdist. Again, it's a good film, but didn't really, with the exception of Pleasures of the Flesh, none of these Oshima films for me really kind of age that well, to be honest. But again, that's just my opinion. My opinion is not fact. Then we have Three Resurrected Drunkards, aka Sinner in Paradise, which is a wonderfully catchy opening song. This stars a Japanese group. I don't know whether they're equivalent of the Monkees, but this is 80 minutes long, and it follows them as they are mistaken for Koreans and how they're treated, and then about halfway through the film starts again with slight differences. There's a lot to like in the film. I mean, the last sequence in a train station is absolutely excellent and might be the best thing in the whole box set. But again, some of it is quite annoying, and again, it is of its time. I don't think. I mean, if you're so specifically political, I think watching films years later, like 50 years later, I don't think they stand up quite as well. There's another set that I have from a Japanese filmmaker who made political films, but I think they've stood the test of time a bit more than these Oshima ones. But again, that's just my opinion. My opinion is not fact. And lastly, we have also from 1967, Sing a Song of Sex. And this is one that really didn't click with me at all. This is from 1967. This is about four sex-hungry high school students. and it's set up on the background in the beginning of the Vietnam War. It's about the power or lack of power of protest. But for me, it didn't really click at all. Again, because he's dealing with metaphor and symbolism, I don't think Oshima in these films, the characters don't actually matter because they're not really characters. So for me, there's nothing really to latch onto. And I just found this one not to be that enjoyable, or actually any good. But again, that's just my opinion. Again, some of these I'll obviously re-watch and I might have a different opinion of them, but I just think most of the films in this set have lots of good things in them, but overall I don't think they've aged that well. But again, apologies to Mr. and Mrs. Oshima if they're watching. They're still good films and I'll revisit them, but for me none of them were game-changing films. Then we jump to Eclipse series 33 with its rather gaudy purple and pink. This is Up All Night with Robert Downey Sr. Yes, Robert Downey Jr.'s dad. And this has Babo 73, Chafed Elbows, No More Excuses, Putney Swoop, and 2 tons of turquoise to Teos Tonight. Now these are experimental. These are certainly not for everybody. These are films that won't be getting rewatched anytime soon, I don't think, apart from Putney Swoop. So we have Babo 73, which is 56 minutes from 1964, and again this is about somebody who's the President of the United States who lives on the beach. Chafed Elbows from 1966, which is 58 minutes, which again there's no narrative particularly. No More Excuses from 1946, which is a really strange, interesting film about a Civil War soldier who's somehow transported to 60s America, and it follows him walking around the street just being more and more bemused. Again, these are interesting films, certainly films worth checking out, but they might give you a headache. And then Putney Swope, which is his famous one, which Indicator have always leave little cover art in their catalogue that at some point Indicator might be releasing Putney Swope. I don't know whether there's rights issues or whatever. Then 2 tons of turquoise to Teos Tonight. Putney Swope is the only kind of feature length film, which is a wonderful, challenging film. I mean, I did a video on this set, I think last year or the year before, so you can check out kind of more lucid thoughts on these films. But this is about the token black guy in a company, and he ends up being voted as the next CEO, and how that company changes. It's full of really politically incorrect stuff, but it's also a lot of fun. It's still relevant as far as some of the opinions and the things that are going on. And then we have 2 tons of turquoise to Teos Tonight, which again has no narrative and is just fairly random. That's 56 minutes from 1975. So like I say, you can go check out the video that I did on this set. Again, this isn't a set for everybody. I'm not sure I would even recommend it. But if you're in the mood for some anarchy and madness, then you could probably do worse than checking out the Robert Downey Sr. set. Explains a lot about his son. Next we have Eclipse series 37, and this is when horror came to Shokiku, Japanese studio, and this is a really gaudy yellow and black. This has 4 films. This has the X from Outer Space, which is a man in a rubber suit monster film from 1967, which is a whole lot of fun. Then we have Gokei, Body Snatcher from Hell, which is a great title, from 1968, which again is so much fun. All these films are just an absolute blast, about alien invasions. This one is The Living Skeleton from 1968. Again, so much fun. And then Genocide, again from 1968. This one's about insects taking over the world. So all 4 of these are well worth checking out if you like Japanese horror science fiction from the 60s. I think this was the first Eclipse set I got, and I would highly recommend it if you're that way inclined. Next is objectively the best set. This is absolutely wonderful, and I would highly recommend picking up if you can. It is fairly expensive, but it's so worth it. This is Misaki Kobayashi Against the System. This is Eclipse Series 38. Friend of the channel, Roger Kirby, did individual videos on these films. I'll leave links in the description below, you should go check them out. And these are perhaps not as great as Human Condition and Kwaidan and Harakiri, but they're some of the greatest films ever made. But these are all excellent. Again, these are socio-political, and like I was saying, I think these have aged way better than the Oshima ones, but again, that is just my opinion. So we have from 1956 Black River, which is kind of like a noir. Again, it's all about the backdrop of the US occupation and the influence of capitalism and how that has corroded the morals of Japanese society. This one is set around a military base. It involves a love triangle and land rights, and it's wonderful. It stars Tatsuya Nakadai, who obviously would appear later, and obviously The Human Condition. So that one is really good. Then perhaps my favourite of the set is The Inheritance from 1962, which also stars Nakadai. And again, this is about a businessman on his deathbed who's going to split his fortune. Actually has 3 illegitimate children, and then the people in his employ go find the children, and back deals and side deals and blackmail ensue. And again, it's pretty much about the evils of capitalism, but it's still done with characters that are well rounded. And so even though it's metaphor, and even though it's symbolism, and even though it's about the underlying condition of the Japanese society at the time, it's still got characters you can identify with and hook onto, and it's just excellent. Again, I was going to do videos in these, but I just felt I wouldn't actually do them justice, especially this one. This one's another excellent film, The Thick Walled Room from 1956. This one, was this the one of them? I can't remember which one it was. One of them was actually made in 1952 but was shelved for I think it is actually this one, sorry. So this was released in 1956, but it was actually made in 1953. It was shelved by the authorities. And this is about Japanese prisoners of war who were kept in Japan by the occupation, the US occupation. Meanwhile, all the officers got away scot-free. All the kind of rank and file soldiers were still kept in prisons. It's absolutely brutal, but it's also wonderful, and I'd highly recommend watching it, even though it's not an easy watch. None of these Kobayashi films are. And it follows each of the characters. They all have their own journeys and their own stories, and it's a pretty phenomenal film. And then finally, I Will Buy You. Pretty clear what Kobayashi's intentions are. This is 1956, and this is, when the US occupied Japan after World War II, one of the things was to teach the Japanese baseball, because it teaches teamwork, and, yes, you're an individual, but you're part of a team, and Kobayashi takes this to the nth degree with I Will Buy You, which is literally about the scrabbling by agents and companies to get this really good prospect for their team, and again all the bribery and the blackmail, and again how capitalism has basically destroyed Japanese society after World War II. Again, it's a really good film, and Kobayashi, who again I'll admit I just knew his hits essentially, but these are 4 more excellent films by him, and this is the set that I would definitely try and pick up if you can. I think these have been on the Criterion channel if you actually have the Criterion channel, but if you don't and you like physical media, no matter how expensive this one is, it's totally worth it, because they're all, I would say none of them are the masterpieces that some of his other films are, but they're all like at least 4-star films, and they're the kind of films that if I did give halves out of 5, there'd be 4.5s probably, at least 3 of them I think. And then finally, which is kind of fitting, Eclipse Series 40 is Late Rye. So this has The Home in the World, An Enemy of the People, and The Stranger. Again, if you've seen my Anpyjrt series on the channel, I'll have done reviews of them as well, so you can check them out. So we have Home in the World from 1984, which again, it's a beautiful film by Rye, like most of his films are. And then we have An Enemy of the People from 1989, based on, is it Chekhov? Yeah, about a doctor and contaminated water. Sounds fascinating, and it is. And then his final film from 1991, The Stranger, which sadly Rye had to finish some of it in an oxygen tent before he died in 92, 93. It delivers a huge emotional wallop, and it's a fitting end to a spectacular career, and still for me an underrated career. But that's Late Rye, and again I would highly recommend picking this one up as well. So that is my small Eclipse series by Criterion, even though, as you've seen, they do include lots of films. So again, thanks very much for watching another Backlog cleared video. Please let me know in the comments below, like I said, what's your favourite Eclipse series, what's your favourite film, in that bunch. And hopefully you'll join me again as I slowly chip away at my backlog. This is Solitude from Solitude Films, saying farewell.